Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 69. My guest in this episode is Erin Easton, and Erin is a mindfulness coach and practitioner, and she's been practicing and teaching mindfulness for over 10 years, and she also completed her master's research in the use of meditation and mindfulness in language acquisition. And so in this conversation, we will learn about Erin's background and history and what brought her to where she is with the practice that she does and teaches. And I will have any contact information and social media for Erin down below in the description field. And I very much enjoyed this conversation. Erin's a wonderful person, a very warm soul, and I enjoyed speaking with her. And I hope this conversation is a good takeaway for you. I hope it is of value to you. So thank you for joining both of us, and enjoy. I'd like to welcome Erin Easton to the IdeaCast interview series. I'm looking forward to a productive conversation where I anticipate becoming more knowledgeable and more informed about matters such as mindfulness and meditation and well-being in the mind, body, and spirit. So Erin, welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Justin. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you as a guest. And again, as I said, I'm looking forward to getting some good tips and good information from you. And to the YouTube audience, I will say welcome to you all as well. I will note that before we get started in the conversation, as is the case with every one of my interviews, I will have Erin's information down in the description field. We will have her website, social media, and anything else that might be relevant for discovery. And I would encourage you to do that discovery, especially rather her YouTube channel. I've been checking out the content, and there's a lot of richness in there. So, Erin, I think let's be traditional and get started by getting to know you, the background story that led you to where you are in your life at the moment, and the work that you do.
Great. I was always kind of a seeker. I questioned everything and I like to know things. I was a big learner. But the kind of first part of my journey mostly went into language. So when I was 16, I did an exchange program to Switzerland and learned French at that time. Was really bad at learning language in a classroom. Always struggled with the class format and the rules and the testing. And actually, the only class I ever had to drop out of in college was Spanish because I was getting a D. And it was going to lower my entire GPA. So I had to drop out of that class, but ended up becoming quite a linguist myself. Now I speak Spanish and French and was learning Italian and teach English as a second language. So kind of showed me the quality of classroom education and what that can do to our kids and their motivation to learn. But yeah, so my languages kind of started me on my travel journey and opened me up to different ways of living, different spirituality, religion, cultures, languages, etc. So I think that really started the expansion of mind and looking into difference. So, and that was always really fun for me, learning about other people and their way of life and seeing the world and seeing that we all see the world so differently. And yet somehow it all works. You know, we all find our way in it. So that love of kind of travel and language brought me into language teaching, which I really only did to be able to live abroad and travel places that let you earn money wherever you lived. So I started my career in language. And part of being an adventurer, I also really enjoyed adrenaline sports. So I used kind of that sport outlet, that athletic, physical outlet to kind of process, or rather avoid maybe emotions, mental and emotional turmoil. I would kind of just go ride it out on the bike or the ski slope. But that ended up taking its toll on my body. And I had a ruptured disc in my back that gave me nerve damage down my left leg. And it was about 3 years that I really couldn't do much more than like flat walking, and even sitting. Like I ended up moving to Switzerland to do my master's at that time, but I would stand in the back of the classroom because I couldn't sit. And I'd have to kind of like sway and pace because sitting hurt so bad, and I'd bring a cushion with me places to sit on if I needed to. But that kind of showed me, I didn't have my outlet then, my kind of vice for taking care of my mental and emotional state. And so I was like, I gotta look like I was doing really bad at this point. You're depressed, you can't do the sports you love, you can't hang out with the people that you used to, right? Because they're still skiing and biking. So they don't mean to, but you do get a little bit left behind.
Sure.
When that happens. So, the loneliness. And then, of course, because I kind of avoided looking at some of my past traumas with adventure, you distract yourself every time you move. It's a new adventure and you're distracted again, or every time your adrenaline is pumping and you're flying down the mountain, it's a distraction. You don't have to think about kind of those other traumas. So all of that was coming back up through this process. And of course, the fear brought on by pain, which if anybody's ever had chronic pain, they know what I'm talking about. It just takes over your whole mind and your whole perception of the world. You're afraid of it's never going to go away. You're afraid of its implications. You're afraid of the limitations it puts on you, the stigma. So all this is like going on in my mind and creating anger and depression. And I'm like, I got to look for something that's going to help me through this. So I need a support, a new support. And that's when I found meditation and mindfulness.
Okay.
So yeah, I started, I was in Geneva at the time. So I had left, I was in little mountain town, Buena Vista of Colorado, where if you don't ski or bike or climb, like there's nothing for you. Yeah. Rafting, like, so I knew I had to leave. And that's when I went to do my master's in Geneva, Switzerland. And there I sought out meditation and mindfulness. And it was this little monastery, Tibetan Buddhist monastery at the top of this little mountain outside of Geneva called Mount Salève. And so every Friday I'd take a bus all the way through Geneva. It would exit the French side of Geneva. And then there was a little telefunicular that would go up the mountains. You'd take the little telefunicular, and then it was about a 20-minute walk to the monastery. So I'd do this every Friday and take a meditation and philosophy class.
Okay.
And that's where I started the meditation journey.
Wow. What a place to start, right? And
yeah.
Fitting that you come from Buena Vista, Colorado to what I presume is the Alps when you're up a funicular. Is it a rail system, like a cog rail system that takes you up? Is that what that is?
It's a cable.
Oh, so it's a airborne cable thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. For some reason I was imagining that old cog system, but that's a different mode. And it's funny, on a tangent, I had a high school chum. He lives in Buena Vista, and he and I were hellraisers back in the day, like in the mid 80s. And he sent me a note a few years ago, and he's been a corrections officer for like 20 years. And he goes, I always knew I was going to end up in jail. It's some of the things we used to do. We were like, all the felonies we commit. And I'm like, yeah, well, at least you're on this side, the right side of the bars. But he's got a beautiful job. He goes and works with inmates doing trail work and outdoor projects, which is just got to be amazing. So anyway, my little tangent.
He works at the jail in Buena Vista.
Yes, yes. His name's Eric,
Yeah.
and he's lived there for probably since he got back out of high school, which is 30 something years ago. But yeah, he and I were buddies back in the day.
Nice.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
still buddies now.
the school and the jail are the biggest employers
Okay.
of Buena Vista.
Okay, so yeah, he works for he works for the jail, and again, it's so ironic considering. I mean, we never harmed anybody, and they were all victimless crimes, mostly drug crimes, and a little bit of mischievous stuff here and there. But yeah, anyway, so but to know that he's out there in that beautiful place doing that is pretty cool. Good to know he ended up that way instead of turning
Yeah.
into a further miscreant. He grew up and got responsible. So, but yeah, going and immersing yourself in this. Monastery or their center there. And so was it a teaching facility? You said they were taking philosophy classes as well?
Yeah, they just offered it to the community. It was really
Okay.
and it was very small. I think really there were only 4 monastics
Okay. Oh,
living at this one center. And then, they offer teachings to the
okay.
local community.
Okay. And in the classes that they taught, were they based on a particular school of Buddhism, or what were they teaching?
I think that's why I loved them so much, is this particular monastic, it was really just like general
Oh,
philosophy
okay.
behind meditation. And then
Okay.
I went once to like their actual kind of ceremony in their temple, and that I was like, no,
Oh, yeah.
not so much. So I think that was more like Vajrayana Buddhism, and so
Okay.
they were like reading from the text, doing the rituals. There's all the statues around, and um, really diving into like the text and what did it mean, and trying to interpret it. And it was like, for me, I just didn't need that. I just wanted how does
Yeah.
this apply to me now, and how can I use it?
Okay. So was it in Geneva that you obtained you said you went there for your master's studies, and then you got your master's in mindfulness meditation and language acquisition. And so in doing that, describe that, because it seems like an unusual pairing of language acquisition and the practice, if you will, of mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah, so like I said, I always already had my doubts about teaching in the
Okay.
traditional setting because it hadn't worked. Based on the school system, I was bad at language learning. I dropped
Right.
out of the classes, and
Yeah.
yet here I was a natural, really, once I moved there, and I became fluent quite quickly. So I was
Okay.
already kind of skeptical and ready to kind of shift the way I was teaching or engaging with language. So when I went to Geneva to do my master's, I already had this in mind. Like, I was already skeptical of the system, but it's a passport in to the country, right? If you're a student, like, they welcome you in and you can be there for 2 years. So that's kind of how I got into the master's, doing French as a foreign language. So teaching French as a foreign language, which would be the equivalent of like if someone studied ESL here. So teaching English as a second language as a native speaker. And even in my master's program, I got told by several teachers I wasn't good at, like, my French is not good enough to like be here, because I'm one of the only non-natives in the program, and I'm the only American. So, and then knowing kind of the French's perspectives on Americans, and anyway, I didn't feel very welcome.
Yeah, no, I can feel you on that. I mean, I've not had like dramatic experience with that, but the couple times the one time I passed through France twice, and yeah, there were nice French people who would, I'd butcher their language trying to say something, and they'd be like, "Stop, please," and other people just kind of look at you and dismiss you. So it depends on who you get, but I kind of get that they just kind of look down.
Oh yeah,
silly English. Oh
we
gosh.
like to say it's just a stereotype, but it really does.
It shows up in some people, I think. Yeah. Not to
Yeah.
generalize, of course, but yeah. I feel you.
Yeah.
So at the risk of straying down a path from the mindfulness and meditation, it strikes me that maybe immersion and practice is much better, was better for you and probably for a lot of people who learn a certain way than vis-a-vis the textbook and the repetition and things and the grind that they put you through in that academic sense. That
Correct.
makes sense. That makes sense.
Yep. So while I was like doing this master's and I'm like struggling hard, right? Feel like I don't belong, feel like I'm not good enough. I'm studying meditation at the same time, where this makes you feel very centered, very grounded, makes you feel like you belong everywhere, that you carry that inside yourself. It brings you that sense of like confidence, that you carry it within you. And I'm like, wow, I'm like learning a lot more in my meditation classes than my master's. And actually it's serving me a lot better than these academic setting courses. And that's when I was doing a lot of retreats and like workshops through Thich Nhat Hanh's practice and the Plum Village tradition, which is in Bordeaux, France. And he also has a little one in Paris. They actually did a lot of workshops with teachers at that one with Educ Inspire, which is a branch of Plum Village directed towards education, so mindfulness and education. And so I'm at these centers with people from all over the world. They speak all different languages, and they come here to this one center, and they're communicating with each other. They're able to express themselves with each other, and they're kind of sharing this one language of mindfulness together. And I meet this 16-year-old boy who had like struggled with language in school, didn't resonate with school, and yet he spent a lot of time at Plum Village, and his English was better than any student I'd ever met. And he'd never been to America, he'd never or an English speaking country, wherever that would be. And yet his English was like impeccable. And I asked him, how did you learn English? Like, how did you learn it this well? And he said it was because of the atmosphere in Plum Village and learning with the monastics, that they're so calm, they're so intentional, and they do the practice of deep listening and loving speech. And when your guard is down that much and you can be that open and vulnerable, you just learn quick. Like, it just soaks in. You want to share, you want to get better so you can express yourself, and it's in an environment where you feel peaceful and at ease. So I was like, you know what? There's something here. And that's when I switched kind of my research in my master's and started studying using meditation and mindfulness in language acquisition. So how can we use this to kind of assist people in their learning process? Okay.
All right. So now after school, you get your master's degree. And did you go to work in a school yourself? When I was doing my research on your background, did you moved into that environment?
I did. So I had been in schools before doing my master's. And then when I came back to the States, it's like anything else, you get like filtered into one job, and then you're like, that's my whole resume. What else do I have? So I went back to the schools, but I did incorporate mindfulness into my classes, and then designed a whole program around mindfulness and brain science for this private school in Durango.
Okay. And furthering my looking into your to your history, I think you was it a crossroads you reached, or you just had this kind of moment of wanting to step out into the void, into the unknown, and leave that behind and move into, again, unknown territory and be brave? And do you want to share some of that too? Or can we talk more about your time in the school? I don't want to just gloss over that. So if there's something we want to extract from that, please. I'm not trying to railroad us through here.
Yeah, that's fine.
One of your chapters in life.
No, it's fine. I think really the school experience was just more of the same. It's like the traditional academic setting doesn't work for me at all. I see that it's not how I want to teach, so I want to be there. Yet being able to teach the mindfulness there was like, at this school I worked at was a boarding school for troubled teens. So they'd either, gone to jail, they'd had legal issues, they got kicked out of every other school.
Bless their hearts.
They came here. Yeah. And these really macho boys like got into the mindfulness and brain science class, and all of a sudden we're like, deep sharing. A lot of them had anger issues, and so they were like expressing things about the reason behind the anger, their needs behind it. They were gaining tools to self-soothe, to calm down, to recenter. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, this is all I want to do. Like, this is what's actually helping society and these kids. Like, I don't want to push grammar down their throat. Like, I want to help them really grow. And that kind of pushed me to leave the academic world and start my own business just doing mindfulness.
Okay. So let's open up that chapter, and that is, as I understand, brings us more into recent times where we are. When did you make that jump? When did you make that move?
About 5. Well, I was kind of working. I was trying to build classes in the evening while teaching. But about 5 years then.
Okay. Now, in this was in Colorado. You'd moved back to Colorado. Just want okay. And in your moving back to the community that you did, I noticed in, again, researching that you had started, first of all, you were involved with a local public radio station, and I think that's really neat. You were sort of not donating, but you were giving your time to having some uploaded mindfulness sessions. But there was was it the Healing Collective of Western Colorado? So was that part of the onboarding of this new adventure of yours, or did that happen later? Like, so 5 years ago, you were sort of getting back, titrating yourself out of the education system and into your own, I guess we could call it entrepreneurial, but also more heart-oriented, mission-oriented aspirations, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. It did happen, kind of gradually, and then all of a sudden it was like, all right, I'm going all in. Like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do this. And anybody who's done that knows the fear in it, the vulnerability, the self-doubt. It's very hard to start your own business, especially, Montrose is a little different than Durango, a little different than other places in Colorado, and it's quite conservative. It's quite Christian. So mindfulness was not really a word in most of the people's vocabulary,
right?
Which was part of the reason why I wanted to start here, because it like, I am the only one, and these people do need exposure to it. It's like a place where it should be, but it also makes it extra hard because you're educating constantly, which is part of why I did the radio show. Is like, just get these people hearing the word, and like, what does it mean, and what does it look like in your life? And that, of course, in all this time, you're like, I'm not a rich person, so like, and I'm waiting to educate everyone and waiting for them to like grow interest and start coming to the business. So it's been one of the largest tests of my own mindfulness practice. To be trying to run a business teaching mindfulness. But that struggle led me to want to, you can also feel really lonely in starting your own business and being a sole entrepreneur. So I wanted to start a community around that and other people who felt that same way, and especially in alternative practices, because we're not readily accepted. We do have to push a little bit more to educate people on what we're doing. A lot of, insurance might not recognize a lot of us. And so that's where the collective came in, was like support. I needed support for myself too.
Yeah.
And I was like,
It's reciprocal.
Yeah. Like, let's collaborate, let's work together. And there can be, I don't know if anywhere or just these kind of smaller communities too, where there's a scarcity mindset, but there can be a deep-rooted competitive, like any healer that comes here is going to steal my clients. Like, people open to alternative practices, there's only so many. So if they choose to go there, they won't come here. And I think that just kills everybody's energy. So trying to switch that over to collaborative rather than competitive, and see that we can all, like, the more that all of us educate and the more that people get more comfortable with all these practices, the more they'll be open to like trying all of them, Yeah.
So I guess the big question then is, in this 5-year journey, were you able to, what's the right way to say it? Were you able to find your fitting into that community, or this community that you occupy, and say break some ice and I guess pick some interest, or how was that journey? How was that? How did that play out for you?
Or slowly.
How is it playing out for you?
It's still playing out.
Uh-huh.
But I do, everybody who comes just can't say enough of how much it helps, which then, of course, small towns, word of mouth is probably going to be your best marketing strategy. It takes time, it's slow, but it's very intentional and it's very impactful when people hear it from somebody that they trust and that they know. So it is happening. The shift is happening even in Montrose based on who's moving here, kind of the energy, the different businesses coming in. So the shift is happening. There's just a lot of patience involved in it.
Okay. Now, in having said Western Colorado, I'm going to intuit that there's some LDS churches there, or what's the breakdown? Is it just sort of average Protestant, sort of Methodist, or is it more the LDS community? Church of Latter-day Saints, I'm sorry.
It's a pretty traditional. Yeah, there's, I would say, mostly just like Christian, Presbyterian.
Okay, so just
kind of is the
Western European Protestant. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And my reason for asking is that, so I'm like a synthesis guy, and I'm always trying to think of, like, how do you find consilience, and how do you penetrate things without violation and things like that. So have you tried like middle ground approaches and sort of speaking the language that they speak without going directly over to the other side of the pole, but so I'm envisioning sort of like non-dual, because there are non-dual, they're usually Catholics, but there are a lot of non-dual Christian folks, but that's a special little outlier group. And so that's why I was wondering if there was anything outside of just sort of mainstream American Protestantism that you might have. So in other words, if there were a lot of Catholics there, you may have some inroads.
Yeah. Well, there actually are like Unitarian churches. There's one that I keep wanting to go visit, actually, but it's, I think, traditional, I think it is Protestant, but it has, we accept LGBTQ and all the
Church of Christ, is it?
Yeah. So like that's pretty rare.
Yeah. No, they're good. They're
here. So there are other options, but I also I grew up Christian, and my mom actually worked in Bible translation over in Africa. So bringing the Bible to small tribes in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
And she did start working with me in mindfulness, and that was a huge leap for
I'd
her.
say so. Yeah.
And she actually went to a retreat with me at Plum Village while working. It's called the Seed Company, and their rules actually, she could have gotten fired.
Yeah.
For going and participating in a different
something outside of the faith. Yeah. Bless her heart. That's so great. Good for you.
Yeah.
Here's to rebellion.
She ended up loving it so much that she actually started to take Thich Nhat Hanh as one of her big teachers, and she left that company and is kind of developing a more open relationship with her faith in Christianity. But I do work with a lot of Christians, and I think it's because I came from that world and because of my mom, and a lot of them don't. I would never ever have them question their faith.
Sure.
And Thich Nhat Hanh actually even taught that, of like, don't leave your traditional faith behind. Like, you can come here, learn these teachings, bring them back into your tradition. Like, keep your tradition, just open it a little bit. And he had at his centers, there were Muslim, there's Christian, there was atheist, it was not like it was just a Buddhist center, practice center. So I think I like that a lot about mindfulness, is that it's not closed, and it can be applied to any lifestyle that you're living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's going to be the community of faith that is deeply embedded in the dogma and deeply embedded in literal interpretation of the sacred text, the Bible or whatever. And I think that's impenetrable. I don't think there's much room for there. But if people who are practicing Christianity understand the roots, the heritage of Christianity, and the overarching allegoric message, and I'm sorry if I'm getting deep here, but the message of Christianity, which is Trinitarian in its nature, which I love Neoplatonism, and so there's a mirror there, or Neoplatonism might have been a template, that transcendence and all these beautiful things and sacrifice, it's if you expand the lens out, there's room to put this in for the sake of mindfulness and contemplation, and then you can re-immerse yourself in the work, and maybe it enriches that, or you're lensing it differently. So for those that can be reached and are willing to be curious about it, and not be concerned about being thrown into the gates of hell because you dared to do something other than what pastor told you. Go for it. Because I mean, and I'm so hopeful for I always call it like a second reformation of Christianity, where there is this rethinking, reimagining, and reinterpretation, and the deliteralization of allegorical text and what was given to us as symbolic language, back during the axial age, or right around the time that Christ existed. And we can't lens it the way we think. Modern people think differently, and we want sort of empiricism and rationality, and that's, I think, what happened to Protestantism and even Catholicism, is it's just very literal in its interpretation. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing we could talk about. But I'm just saying, it's like you could open up and enrich, I think, your faith. And I support that so much. I'm not a practicing Christian myself either, but I love to learn and be inspired by it, and take away what I think is relevant and salient to enrich my practices. So, but bless your heart for doing that. That is so brave, and it's necessary, I think. Again, it's not to overthrow or to overtake or to alter in a negative way. It's just to offer a means, because there are people who are within that system who are dealing with existential issues and emotional crises, and the means of healing that exists in that community can be enriched by an amendment or
Absolutely.
something like you're doing. So I applaud that, and I think that's really neat. So one of the reasons I was attracted to have you on, to your work, to have you on as a guest, was you talk about simplicity and about bringing it back to simplicity, which could, this is a great segue from Christianity, because if simplicity could be employed there, and less worry about words, language, and meaning, and more the relationship. So let's talk about that in your desire and concern to return to a kind of simplicity in practice and praxis.
Yeah, I think that's why I was so drawn to Thich Nhat Hanh.
Mm-hmm.
And to the Plum Village tradition. He is so simple. I mean, it's really just like down to the basics of mindfulness, and he has so many books and so many teachings, and I mean, you can so many videos available out there. But if you really listen to them, they're all so simple to the very basics practices of just centering, finding that calm, using the breath, remembering what's most important, understanding, how you're showing up in the world, and then knowing that you want to show up with that kind of peace and compassion and love and, the main kind of values of the heart that I work with the most. And he doesn't, and I think he even said that of like, we make things so unattainable if we complicate them, and like all this literature around it and all this language, and you're trying to understand that. And it's like this pride thing of, if I get all the lists of all the rules and all the things, like I will arrive. And that's like, that actually keeps a lot of us, it creates an obstacle for a lot of us to just be able to live it. And so if you're really just going to live it, like, it's pretty darn simple. I mean, it's not easy by any means. I always say that. It's definitely not easy, but it can be very simple.
I think when we were talking in our pre-meet together, I kind of gave you some background on like how the gears turn in my head. And so I was telling you, I think about my affinity towards the Pyrrhonian skepticism and apophatics, which fancy Greek stuff, but it's all about clearing space and stripping things down to essentials. And so I love hearing this, because, and again, that's why I was attracted to your work and wanted to bring you on to have this conversation, because I agree with you. I think with the work that you learned, and I can't say his name the way as beautifully as you do, Thich Nhat Hanh. Okay. Yeah, I'll say it my way because I'm just a dumb American. But anyway, that appeals to me so much. And I think that's something and that's like people who get into Stoicism understand that, like Marcus Aurelius, and talking about simplicity. And I think that is it's not a lost art. It's just a sort of obscure art, I think, to understand bringing things down. And who can blame any of us in American Western culture? And we're very consumerist, we're very distracted, we're very chasing goal-oriented, and the sense of individualism, which requires you to struggle really hard against other, opposing forces. But yeah, once you sort of vibe with this for a while and move into the practice of, this is before you even get into mindfulness, but just into understanding that some easy, simplicity, I guess I was going to say easy something, but I got lost. Simplicity, yeah, is so essential to clearing out distraction and obfuscation and things like that. So that's such a great message and practice to be concerned with, to be engaged with.
I think what I notice is, even with myself and even with clients, but that's kind of, I liked how you use that word consumerism in this topic, because it really is that. And we do that on so many levels of consuming knowledge, consuming information, accumulating so that we progress and feed our pride and our ego. And I can see that even in my clients and even in myself, of like that desire to progress beyond, Like, give me more tidbits so that I become the smartest one in this, like in mindfulness. And what I loved about Thich Nhat Hanh is like, nope, really just come back to the basic trainings and right back to the breath and right back to like what actually matters, and is it kind of cuts that dry, you know, and that when we're doing that, it distracts us from the real practice. And we want to be distracted because the real practice is hard.
Yeah.
It is freaking hard to be able to just sit there and watch the breath.
Yeah.
It is really hard to just be here and experience the present moment. And so we want something more. It's like, give me something juicy to chase after so that I don't have to like just be good at being present.
Yeah, it's like you're speaking to inverting goal-oriented thinking to where this isn't about goals, this isn't about arrival. And that's hard to grok in Western thinking. Like, yeah, we set goals and agendas and timelines and measurements and all these things, but like you're saying, the simplicity is almost contra to that, in that this isn't about any of that. And it's almost reflective of the mindfulness practice itself, where you're calming the executive functions of the mind, the monkey, the chatter, and going into silence, which is, you know, I mean, yeah, that just sounds so contrary to what we all, you know, we want to do. We want to stay busy, stay occupied, and like you said, take in, consume information and whatever else. And that has its own numbing. You were talking about skiing and extreme sports. I mean, that's kind of a numbing effect too, to be preoccupied with the distraction. But you know, the revelation that comes, and I use that word kind of lightly, that comes from, so it's not even delayed gratification, I think, when you can find this idea or find this space for yourself in the simplicity and the nothingness and the non-ness and all these other things. You know, it's ineffable almost, right? To get into that kind of either headspace or being space, and appreciate what you're speaking to. I've tasted it, and I don't pursue it, but I think I want to set up conditions and possibilities that you can enter into a space or a mindset to experience it. I guess maybe that's how you say it, is you just you fall into the experience, but it's not something, you know, that's like, what did Yoda say? There's no, don't try, you know, whatever Yoda said, you know, don't try, do, or whatever, you know. I think he said it well, yeah, but it's just, you know, you can't force it, and you can't busy yourself or consume yourself into it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's why people have such a hard time with it, is because it's exactly that. You can't buy your way into it. You can't logic your way into it. You can't fight your way into it. It really is a surrender. It's a surrendering into it. Like, the more you can let go and surrender, the more you can find that peaceful presence in this present moment, in this experience. And we hate that. It's like,
yeah,
we're told that the more we fight for it, the more we grasp, the more we reach, that's how we do it. So then when you're given this practice where you have to do the opposite, it like blows people's and then we try to do it wrong, right? We try to like, there's even grasping within mindfulness, like we want to get to the next level, or we want a deeper teaching in it, or we want it to like give us different tools, and I fall into that too, even with like how to keep it going with coaching, how to do it well with coaching. But that's what we're trained, is like the next nugget. Give me the next nugget.
Right. Well, it's kind of like the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, right? There's all these merit badges, and there's linearity and hierarchy. I mean, that's such our Western structure. And that goes back to Victorian English industrialization. I mean, you know, it's built into society itself. But I mean, that, I think I point to that one little part of history where the English were very much into class and things like that, and then there you were assigned, you were a worker and you did these things, but you aspired to some sort of middle class status, and it's like, that's just born right into American work ethic, and I'm not knocking it. Like, I mean, we have to feed ourselves, we have to clothe and home ourselves and things like that. So it fits, and maybe some genius down the road will come up with something else, but in the meantime, but we can integrate and marry in what you're doing and what many others are doing, in that sense that we can occupy that space of being in this paradigm of work to do, to get, and so forth, but also have this as a capacity for not necessarily just healing, but being in wholeness and being in a state of equanimity or balance, so that you're resilient and capable of doing that, and having fun and recreating and doing things. So many things to be gained by just, like you said, such a simple way. Maybe that's the way to say it.
Yeah.
A simple way.
Yeah.
It's hard, isn't it funny how language falls apart when you try to convey? Yeah, it's like, I've tasted it. It's like something, like a flavor that nobody's had before, like the umami of all umamis. It's like, well, if I could describe it, it would be so easy. But so anyway.
Totally.
Yeah, and I'm not good at it myself, but I've been with some of that, and it's not that I want more. It's just I want to help myself with the potential that's there. I think maybe that's the right way to say it. But yeah, you feel drawn to it, and it's relational. It's like you care enough. And it also reverberates. Like, you care about yourself. You feel this sense of I just well-being or equanimity, and you see the value in it. And this is, of course, when you're tying all of this in with mental health and taking care of your past traumas. Like you said, you had stuff that you were skiing away from, I high school, I did drugs, just to have fun and get away from it, to drop acid and be like, 12 hours, I don't have to worry about anything, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's fun for a while, but you've got to maybe come up with other means. And again, here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. Now, before we wrap things up, I would like to check in with your work that you do, and how you can avail yourself to others, because this conversation is going to go out and have a life of its own. And I always like to visualize that people just discover this through serendipity. And I got a cute story to share with you. Tangent number 5. I was having a pre-meet with a woman a couple days ago, and she's a professor in the UK. And she and I were talking, and I just happened to mention that I'd had Jamaican jerk for lunch, and we had potatoes and chickpea and pigeon pea jerk with mushrooms. And she's like, "You had what?" And I said, "We had jerk for lunch." And she goes, "That's just so amazing." And she loves Jungian synchronicities. She pulled up her phone, and her daughter had just sent her a picture of a jar of Jamaican jerk that they'd had for a meal like the night before or something. She goes, "So you had jerk?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, that's a synchronicity." And she's like, "Oh." And I said, "Well, that's a confirmation that we should be having this conversation." And so we were laughing about that. But to get to a point, finding these relevance scenarios and synchronicities in our lives, and I think that happens when we open up to trusting ourselves and trusting something beyond what the ego says and what the chatterbox says. And I've strayed away from wanting to bring into your work, but I think your coaching and the other practices that you offer will speak to that and will help with that. And so I'll hand it off to you now that I told my Jamaican jerk story. so let's talk about your coaching. And I'll start that by saying I appreciate the fact that you have in your coaching, you have a 30-minute complimentary discovery call. And so let's go from there and talk about the type of coaching you do.
Yeah. So I call it mindfulness coaching. And like I said, it's hard for even me not to fall in the trap of like progressing forward to the goals and that, because coaching, there's a side of it that is that, right? But what I really wanted to do, and after I kind of learned the mindfulness and the masters in school, is like, I want to bring this to people. I want them to be able to find it out here in life. And it was great for me. And I gotta say, when I'm like struggling and feel really alone, because mindfulness is like the most important thing in my life.
Okay.
I know that that's what keeps me authentic, keeps me well, keeps me at peace, is living from the heart, which mindfulness helps me to do that.
Okay.
So there are still times where I'm like, if I feel like living that way out here in rural conservative Colorado is like really hard, I'm like, I'm just gonna go become a monastic, like I want to be supported in this and like be held in this and like have other people who know that that way of life really brings happiness. But I knew, and I even saw, like when I spent so much time at these centers, it's a very select type of person who will go to a center, who will seek this out and go, especially because Thai, that's Thich Nhat Hanh's, it means teacher in Vietnamese, but we can call him Thai. He was Vietnamese Buddhist, right? So these centers appear to be Buddhist, which not just appear, they kind of, they're in that Zen tradition.
Okay.
So now you're very limited onto who's going to feel comfortable coming to this center. Like my mom, right?
Yeah.
She literally would have lost her job going to this center. And yet mindfulness changed her life. Like if you asked her, she would say that is what brought her peace in life. So when I have those doubts and I'm like, I just need to be held and like go somewhere where everybody wants to be mindful, I remember that like out here in rural Colorado, I'm probably their closest source of this. And I'm probably the only way they're going to discover this.
Okay.
And so in my coaching, like my heart is in, and the intention is in like bringing this practice, making it accessible, making it practical for anybody. And so when I do coaching, that's what I want to do, is give you access to this beautiful practice that you can use in your life. So you don't, things shift in your life through coaching, but you don't have to go pick up and change your religion and move to a monastery and switch your job. You can be mindful in exactly what you're doing. And so I teach the basics of the practice, and then I teach how can you apply that in your life and use it just in the way that you live. Like I tell people, you don't even need to have 5 minutes to do a meditation. Like there are ways to be mindful. Like I'm paying attention to my breathing right now, and I'm noticing how my body is reacting to this conversation, and I'm feeling my feet on the ground right now. So mindfulness adapts and comes into your life and how you live it. And that practice, so me giving you that gift of that practice, empowers you to be able to use it for your well-being. So to understand yourself more, to reconnect with your heart, to know your values, and then understand the obstacles that get in the way of you living that, and knowing what you need to nurture yourself so that you can clear space, so that you can live as that authentic, heart-centered version of you.
And what I appreciate about everything you just said is it's a type of coaching that stands out to me, because I've interviewed a number of coaches, and if I bring a coach on and we talk about coaching, they're doing something other than coaching for success or coaching for all these other things. And so yours is sort of a meta practice that if somebody does want to pursue, and this is of course perfectly fine, but a career type thing or anything beyond that. So I love that this is again, perhaps maybe meta practice is a good thing. It's the practice you do before you go into the practice. And then maybe you can hire a business coach, or you can get another performance coach, or whatever you want to do. But the fact that you can ground yourself in what you do, that a person can ground themselves in what you do, I think is important to, as a sort of almost like a cleansing ritual or a preparatory ritual. And you take, if your life is sacred to you or important to you, that if you use that metaphor, that this is a good opening ritual to get you into your next means or phase or whatever you want to call it, to improve whatever it is you want to improve in your life. So that's rich, and I appreciate that. And also on your website, which again link will be down below, you have some modules that people can sign up with. They're learning modules, and I like that too. Now, also we had talked about that we would bring up your practical retreats, like going out into the world retreats together. And that to me speaks to what I hope will be a trend in the future. And of course, retreats are certainly nothing new, but just here's to the rise of going out in small groups of people and connecting with each other in nature. And when we had our pre-meet the other day, I thought, oh my, eating together and being in nature together is such a connecting experience. So let's talk about your retreats. You have one coming up second week of July, I believe, and it's a backpacking retreat.
Yep. So I love the word retreat because what comes to mind when you think of retreat, right? You're like, I'm gonna be pampered. It's gonna be like like plush, and
glamping.
Right. And no, I try to seek out the places, they're so beautiful, but they're very, again, simple. So in the winter retreat, there's no running water. We have to melt snow for water. There's a dry toilet. Mm-hmm. The hut is freezing cold when you get there, and you got to start the fire and stoke it up and, get your heat going. You share a sleeping space. And the reason I seek out this simplicity and why I love backpacking as well is it forces you to do things differently. Mm-hmm. It takes away your creature comforts and shows you the basics of what really matters. Mm-hmm. So we cling so much to what we have and what's provided and the easy, but then you think that gives you happiness, but then you go out and you have none of that, and you're happier and clearer than you've ever been before, because you're communing with nature and you're surviving on very little, and you start to really recognize the gratitude that it brings up is enormous. When you have to filter each bottle of water from the stream, mm-hmm. and it takes 15 minutes sometimes, but you're sitting in this amazing mountain valley looking up at these flower-filled fields and this blue sky, and you're pumping, you're listening to trickle of your water. You're pumping your water to be able to drink mm-hmm. safely, and nothing fills you with more gratitude than that. And then when you drink that water, it's this came from snow melt, came off of this mountainside, traveled down this stream, and is coming directly to me. And you just wow.
Yeah.
This is the source. Mm-hmm. And it gives you an appreciation, which is kind of, I keep bringing it back to Thich Nhat Hanh, but just because I just love his practice so much. But at his centers, they're also very simple. You're not retreating in luxury. But he has signs everywhere that says, I'm grateful for this water that traveled from the clouds into the rain, down through the system, through these pipes, and comes to me here now. And so when you have to go out and pump your own water and create your own fire and build your own shelter, it's like you get in touch with the source. And there's no better place to be mindful, because where you are, that's all you got. Like, there's no cell phone. There's no computer. There's no cars whizzing by. Like, it's you and nature, and your present moment is your whole experience.
Yeah. I'm just visualizing that. I'm ready. That's just so beautiful. Yeah, that's so neat. And so I listen to philosophers sometimes and like on YouTube, and they talk about like what is the self and what is being and what is, yada yada, our relationship with reality. And when I was listening to you, I'm like, this strips away, and it speaks to you speaking about, my idea of a retreat is posh, and, we do all these wonderful things to me. And so, but getting into nature, you're sort of rediscovering that there isn't a duality there. So we have the Cartesian split of the mind and the body, and nature and the self. And so all of that speaks to me that you are so connected and so embedded, and you are not distinct at all from that water you're drinking or the land that you're walking on. I mean, to get really weird, I mean, we're nothing but carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, nitrogen, all these things ourselves. And so that's where you are. You're right there with your fellow carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. And so, I'd probably be really annoying on a retreat, because I'd be like, oh my God, can you imagine? So I'd just be a little kid again. So, so that just sounds like so much fun. And again, and you don't have to go as bizarre as I just went, but like, just to know that you are nature, you are not distinct and separate from. And when we live in our houses and we go to work and we go to the stores, we do feel separate and distinct, and we see other people and we do feel so separate and distinct. But I think getting into that environment, especially with fellow people, and you and your fellow people get to open up and talk in this mindset of being connected. And again, between that and the ceremony of eating and sharing the adventure together, wow, so many things coming together. Sorry if I'm gushing here, but I just get that. And it is such good medicine. I mean, beats the hell out of Prozac and therapy, things like, and I put a disclaimer in there. If you're dealing with a pathology, if something is really severe, obviously those things have their place. But if you're just in, like me, garden variety, stress and anxiety and depression things, this is such a great way to break some of that. In fact, they have this psychedelic renaissance going on right now, and people who do psychedelics will say, well, it reset me. I went on to this thing where I became the universe, and then I came back, and then I don't feel separate or connected. So the anecdotes are similar, like ayahuasca journeys and things. I talked to a guy the other day, and he was a hard-headed, he works for Google, hard-headed guy, math all the way, and he went and did ayahuasca, and he's just like, it just shifted him. And he's like, I just felt, and again, in the jungles of Ecuador or Peru, wherever it was, and I felt so connected. And it's like, so this is a subtler way to get out into nature with Erin and do the backpacking. And I just love it. I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but it's just, all right. Yeah. It just sounds so beautiful. What I'd like to do is offer you an opportunity to cover maybe one last thing and or share any last thought that you'd like to with the audience, and then we'll call this interview number 1, and you're welcome to come back for another one if you'd like, if you had a good experience on this one. But yeah, let's have you share one last thought or idea if you want, or one last thing you want to share with the audience.
I guess the only other thing would be, if you want, at-home help for building a practice, as I did write a book.
Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry. I didn't even.
That's okay.
Let's do that, and let's take our time. I don't want to rush that book. Yeah.
No, it's fine. But it's living from the heart, healing ourselves so we can heal the world. So that's kind of the point of the practice, I think. Mindfulness, settling, coming back to center, it's kind of in that stillness and that grounded state that you really hear the heart. So I think that There's so many obstacles in our way, the busyness, the ego, the trying to achieve, the past traumas, the resentments, the angers, you name it. But all of those are just like obstacles and added on layers. And when we kind of settle through them and come back to center, I believe that we do all have that core of ourselves that's essence and that's good. And that I call them the 5 values of the heart: love, peace, compassion, acceptance, gratitude. And so we build this practice that essentially it's there to help us reconnect with our center. So settle through all those layers that distract us and get in the way. And who am I at my core? And then when I live from those values, what can I do? Like, wow, like so much. And like, who can I be in the world? And it's incredible how you can show up in the world if you're living authentically from your heart's center. So the book is very, again, simple language, very straightforward. Gives you a practical way to build your practice, to kind of find that mindfulness, that presence, the stillness that then connects you with the heart, builds that awareness, and helps you live from the heart. Yeah. Living from the heart.
Yes. And heart-based living is moment of silence for heart-based.
Yeah.
It's a strong metaphor. It's such a strong grounding to think, live, and love through your heart. Absolutely. Yeah. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there's an open invitation to come back. So perhaps I can pick up a copy of the book, bring you back in a few months, and we could focus on the book itself. In my preparing for the interview, I didn't read the book, and I almost forgot the darn thing, which I have mea culpa. But maybe we can have you back in a few months, and if I can, I will have time to read it if I'm bringing you back, of course, and so we can talk about it more and more in depth. And that I would enjoy that if that's something that you would be up for. So yeah. I really want to. Okay, I really want to thank you for your time. And to close out my silly Jamaican jerk story before I went on that tangent, I was talking about serendipity or synchronicity. And so I have this visualization that I do with our videos, any conversations that I release, that they go out in the world, they have a life of their own, and they just have this synchronous discovery phenomena, so that people will, if they're meant to find a video, they will find a video. If they're meant to find our conversation, they're meant to find, and I'm not putting a heavy, like hard telos on that, like it's purpose, it's driving it. So, but I love to visualize that because the right people will find the video. So here's to that. I hope that this video ends up with who it needs to end up with, and that your work can work with them. And it's all about helping our fellow humans with changing their lives and bettering their position in the world and their status in the world. And I mean that from a soul-ensouled kind of way. So Erin, thank you for doing the good work. I appreciate that. Soldier on. Oh, and one last thing, like you're in a Protestant Christian community, I'll say to the audience that I'm aligned with you for the most part in how I see things and how I approach mindfulness and meditation and seeing the world through that kind of lens. But nonetheless, I'm going to go to a Franciscan monastery and do a silent retreat and go to mass and listen to Lectio Divino and things like that. So it's crossover, I mean, there's no harm, no foul in either approach, because I think in all of that, there is a way to commune and connect with whatever you consider essence to be, whatever you consider the divine to be, however you want to frame that. So even though I'm a hard-headed person in that regard, that I don't adhere to the doctrine, I still love the practice. And so if that helps anybody.
I love that.
Yeah. There's ways to
in case I scared anyone off, my mom still is Christian and follows Jesus.
Good. Good.
loves his teaching. So it's not one or the other ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And again, a second reformation of that, I think, would just help deepen the relationship with Christ and the Trinity. Mm-hmm. Again, that's what I love about the backstory of Neoplatonism as it's applied to Christianity is it's anyway, not to belabor, but yeah, there's so much richness there and so much room for transcendent and transformative experience. So anyway, again, Erin, thank you so much. I very much appreciate having had this conversation with you, and we'll talk later about getting you back, and we'll talk about your book and unpack that. So I'll say goodbye to you after we're done recording, but to the YouTube audience, thank you guys so much for being in this conversation with us as observers of the or listeners of the conversation. I appreciate that very much. So have a good day, everyone. I'm starting to trip over my words now. I'm like getting lost in the backpacking adventure. So blah, 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 blah. Anyway, take care, everyone.